Cousin Jared, we made money in week 0. I mean, we've made money before week 1 even started, and now we are approaching the best weekend of college football up until some of the bowl season gets going on, and maybe even better than that, to be honest. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 3 games on Sunday for the first time that I can remember. And then the Monday night. Good things all around. I'm excited to be here. I don't know about you.
Yeah. I mean, Miss Cousin Jared even put out the pumpkin soap, hand soap today around the house. And so we're really pushing for fall and football season around this house.
We are pushing for it. It was like 107 here today. So it's not happening yet. Week 0, more things went right than wrong, which is always fun. Obviously, we did not nail everything. Never said we would never play into. I mean, that would be cool. But it's kind of a weird thing. But I've talked about this with baseball. Like, if you actually hit every pick, like, you almost have to be worried, like something's going wrong. Like, that's definitely some weird things happening there. Like, we understand we're dealing with probabilities miss. And when we have a finely tuned model, we know we're going to be wrong. All we're trying to do is assess where there is long-term edge. It's worked out for us in college basketball. It's worked out for us in baseball. It worked out for us in week 0. It's just the same thing, lather, rinse, repeat. Was there anything you wanted to talk about specifically from week 0, aside from whatever the heck is going on with Vanderbilt Stadium? The repeat of whatever the heck was happening with Hawaii's last year. I don't know what is up with these 2 teams. Week 0, the stadium issues.
Yeah, I think, the first thing is one thing that we did get exactly right was the Notre Dame Navy game. I have to say, I'm concerned about Navy this season, which we kind of talked about last week. But even in seasons where Navy's been a little bit down, they usually have a tendency to play Notre Dame close, at least ugly the game up in a way that, doesn't let it get too far out of hand. But this one, of course, everybody saw what happened. So I think Navy might be in for a long season. And as far as like playoff implications go, USC's defense looks the same. So, I mean, is that going to change, wins and losses in the Pac-12? Maybe or maybe not. I don't know. But it just seemed like a lot of the same stuff that we saw last season, even though it's just one game, week 0, played a lot of backups, I'm sure. Seemed like a lot of the same things.
Although you said see and no one in the world saw it. So I don't really know how you can use that word.
That's true.
Hey, I will say the interesting thing about that game is you never expect a game to have every score be a touchdown unless it's like Navy Army. And that sometimes happens because those teams, when they're moving the ball, they go for it on 4th down a lot because that triple option, the way it works, their offense is set up at triple option, 3rd and 5, run the ball for 4 yards and go for it on 4th down, right? Other than that, than those type of games, you do not expect to see not a single field goal kicked. And that, I think, was the interesting thing about that one. Does that say something about USC offensively, defensively? Was it random variation? That's the tough part with college football, and that's where our priors and our previous season's data and some of that stuff really comes into play. Because unlike baseball and even college basketball a little bit, we won't get enough data to really have a great picture even by the end of the season. We'll know a little more. But small sample sizes of football. And so trying to figure that out, I think is interesting. It'll be something to keep an eye on, especially with USC, given the playoff implication. Are they going to be a team that just is so good offensively, teams cannot stop them and force their field goal unit out there? Are they going to be so bad defensively, they cannot force field goal unit out? It's very possible. We saw it last year. Or was that just a one-game anomaly? Obviously, we'll know more as the season progresses, but I think that was a very wild result there. Almost as wild as FIU almost pulling the upset with 4 yards passing, which seems impossible for a non-triple option offense. I don't even know how to. I have no words. I'm not even mad. I'm pissed, right?
Yeah.
It's good week 0. On to week 1. Thursday night, I mean, the game everyone's talking about here, leading us off Florida and Utah. We expect Cam Rising to play and be as close to 100% as possible. You never know with injury. So, I mean, just that's the caveat in the back of your mind. These 2 teams are pretty similar. I mean, both of them are pretty good offensively, pretty good defensively. The differentiator here is that Utah's defense is probably a step ahead of Florida's, which according to Sideline, lags behind a little bit. The game's in Utah, and Utah being a little bit better of a team. That's why Sideline says it should be Utah minus 6.8, predicts a final score of 33-26. Says that Utah wins this 2 out of 3 times, but cover-wise, given the spread of 7 right now, it's pretty 50-50. Cousin Jared, we're not going to take a side on this one. I think 7 is a pretty good number, and Sideline agrees. I will say if it gets to Florida plus 7.5, that hook matters a lot. Yeah. And, if you see it, that's one where I don't think I could pass it up, assuming the juice isn't too crazy. There's a lot of worlds where Utah wins this by exactly 7, whether it's that score on screen, which it probably won't be, or some other combination of points. 7 is very, very common. That hook's going to matter a lot there. But I think 7's pretty well set. The thing that we like a pick on here is the over 46.5. You can see on screen there, the projected score is, total is more like 59. This number is really low. And we're expecting a lot more points than the experts do. It's an A-grade pick on the over 46.5. Because of Jared, what do you got?
I love the over here as well. I think this is 2 things. Number one, people still have this perception of Utah, even though this is not how Utah played last year. Utah scored plenty of points. They gave up plenty of points at times last season, but it's just this perception of how Utah plays. And the other thing, which I can't shoot a hole in this in, is Graham Mertz is the starting quarterback for Florida. So that is the caveat to this play. If you take the over 46.5, note that you are investing in Graham Mertz, but I just think that you would have to see, I know this game last year had Anthony Richardson in it, who has acquitted himself very well so far in the NFL preseason. Obviously a very good player, was taken very high in the draft for a reason. Don't get me started on Will Levis. But the thing is that you would have to see something.
Not even covering Kentucky, and you got to throw that.
Yeah. It would take something, in my opinion, very dramatic from what we saw last year to go under this number. And I just don't see anything with either of these teams that make me think we're going to see a substantially different game. The players may have changed and everything, but if anything, okay, yes, Utah lost Dalton Kincaid. They're really good tight end. But Cam Rising is back for approximately a 15th season. Again, if he plays, it's sounding like he is. So I think this is going to go over. If this game ended up at like 52, that feels about right, 51, 49. There's lots of ways that you go over this 46.5 number. I just think these 2 teams are too talented, even early in the season, to end up at a number like this.
Game had 55 points last year, and I think there's a lot made about losing a guy like Richardson, losing a guy like Kincaid. I mean, 2 very good players, absolutely. No insult to them. Everybody else that's back has gotten better. Right. And that's the thing to remember. It's yes, they've lost some players, but it's not like the other offensive players and the other defensive players, for that matter. Everybody got better. So both teams lost players on both sides of the ball. Both teams got better. And there's something to be said for a guy like Graham Mertz, maybe in a better situation for the offense. Better system, a better quarterback coach, that sort of situation for him. And of course, Rising in Utah scoring a lot of points. And you make a great point that 2 years ago, Utah kind of did it where they didn't really let Rising loose too much until the very end of the year. They won with great defense. Last year, they really opened it up and played a very different style of football. And there's no necessarily indications of why they would change that with most of the same pieces in general back. 46.5. We think way too low. We love this over. Good chance of getting their A-grade pick. Friday night game. There are some Thursday games. There's some Friday games. The Friday slate's a little bit weaker, but this one has a great opportunity to profit, and it's a decent matchup. It's maybe not quite as good as some of the other matchups, but probably your most interesting matchup and a great opportunity to profit. And of course, I say great opportunity to profit. We're going to have a lot of A-grade picks this week because there's a lot of big edges, a lot of things we like, and a lot of picks we like that we aren't covering on the show because there may be less interesting games.
As I was looking over the spreads this week, I got first couple of weeks of college basketball vibes is what I was getting. Yeah.
Yes, and for those of you who are unaware, in the first couple of weeks, the last several years of college basketball, we've had a ton of A-grade plays, and it's just the money just pours in. And the books start adjusting and catching up, and we have to be a little more selective. We got a lot of great plays. So if you want all those plays, remember, sign up on Dub Club. That link's in the show description. But your best Friday night game is Louisville, Georgia Tech. As you can see on screen there, remember, higher is more points. So we like Louisville's defense as probably the best unit on the field. Their offense is okay. Georgia Tech's offense a little bit lagging behind. Model says Louisville by 12 12.3 that they win about 80% of the time, a 58% chance to cover, and that's a pretty good little edge for us here to take Louisville minus 7.5. There is the hook on this one, but there's a handful of games every season that I see the 7.5 and I say, I think people are going to be worried about the hook, and this isn't the hook they should be worried about. The hook they should be worried about is at 10.5, not 7.5. And I remember a couple games said it last year. And for the most part, that's the way when these spreads should be bigger. I think people overthink the hook a little bit too much. That's not to say it's not important. Just I don't think it's going to be as important in this game. Louisville, I think, is just a far better team. Model projects an average score of 29-17. Cousin Jared, what is your take on this one?
The game that I thought of was Mississippi State and Arizona at the beginning of last season. I believe that we laid 8.5 points and we said, doesn't matter. This should be like 11. And it ended up closing at like 12.5 or something like that. And Mississippi State won by 15. I think that Jeff Brom with Louisville was at least for me, a very frustrating team the past handful of seasons. Yeah. I think that Jeff Brom, whether the total wins go up or down, I'm not sure. It may stay even about the same, but I think they're going to be a lot more consistent in the way that they play. And they're just at a point as a program that is quite a bit ahead of where Georgia Tech is at. I believe Haynes King is going to be the starting quarterback for Georgia Tech, transfer from A&M, who I got to see play quite a bit. And I think, he could definitely be a good player, but, first game in a new system and everything. Louisville bringing over Brom. I believe he brought over one of his quarterbacks that played for him at Purdue. And so I think there's going to be some familiarity there. So I really like Louisville in this game. To your point, don't worry about the hook on 7. Don't wait around for it. I think you should grab this now. And then later in the week, it's going to be like 8.5 or 9. And so again, don't wait on it. Grab it now. And this is going to probably close closer to 10.
Brom, part of the weird coaching carousel that existed last year in college football, a guy that I think we all pegged for the Louisville job back in 2017 when he took the Purdue job. He was an assistant head coach there. He played there. And after how well he did at Western Kentucky, I think we all expected him to go to Louisville. Instead, he gets the Purdue job, which seems like a step up, and then now drops down to Louisville by choice. It's a very weird situation, but definitely an upgrade for coaching. I like him as a coach. I think he's done great things in that part of the country, and I think for a program like Louisville, I expect him to take them to pretty good heights in a weaker conference.
Yep. And it's funny how maybe your outlook on the conferences have changed so much, even since he made that move just a handful of, I guess it's been more than a handful of months ago now. But in a short amount of time, your perception of the ACC versus the perception of the Big Ten has, the gap there has increased even since he took the job. Yeah.
Yeah, what a weird world. Speaking of weird worlds and coaching moves, Colorado at TCU will be the big noon Saturday game. I don't think this is going to be a necessarily interesting game. I don't think Colorado is going to be worth anything this year. I think they're going to be pretty bad. I think you're going to see the same issues with Colorado all season that you saw on USC's defense last year with all the transfers. It's just hard to get everybody together on the same page in that year one. That doesn't mean that Deion can't do good things to this program in the future. It doesn't mean it's not an interesting story. It's hard to get everybody on the same page right away. They're starting from basically nothing. I mean, everybody of talent left, and they didn't have a ton of talent anyway. And building from the ground up is difficult. Ask any number of college coaches who've done it. It can be done. It usually takes a couple of years. So I don't think Colorado's going to be that good. I think they're looking at like a 3 to 4 win season. But, it's the talk of the town. And I don't know how many advertisements I saw this weekend for this game. So we'll cover it here also because I think there's 2 great betting angles on it. This should be a runaway. TCU's offense is much better. Their defense is much better. Their special teams is much better. Their everything is much better. I don't really have to spend much time on that. Model says that TCU wins by an average of about 26 points, that they cover 65% of the time, and that they win, of course, 96% of the time. Because I think that seems right. If Colorado wins at 4%, that seems about right. We'd be like, it's not impossible, but it would be very surprising with a projected score of 40-15. We've got 2 plays on this one. TCU minus 21. I love getting this at 21. In case it goes higher, I think it should be higher. I think it should probably be more like 24, then under 59.5. You have to expect some bumps in the road for Colorado offensively. TCU can probably name their score, but you can't see Colorado scoring, too many more points than something like 14. What's your take on this one, Cousin Jared?
I cannot wait to watch Colorado this year. I, like you, think that they're going to be in for a rough, long season. But I saw a stat the other day that I believe they have 85 or 86 new players on the roster. Just absolutely ridiculous. And I have no idea if it's going to work short term. Are the results going to be great? I don't think so. But could this team be better than they were last year with 86 new players? Yes, I think the team could be better. Is that going to translate? Is that going to translate into a lot more wins? I don't know, but they could be better and still not win very many games. I'm just going to be fascinated to see if this could watch. My thing with Colorado, even more so than the 86 new players, is that a lot of those players left and came in after spring practice. And so they haven't even had a whole lot of time during the spring to practice together. It's been, let's be for real. They've been working out during the summer. It's not sanctioned, but I'm sure they've been working out over the summer. And then of course the practices as we started up fall here. So I'm going to be fascinated to watch Colorado. I just think that they might have some depth issues. The top line guys might be fine. I think they're going to have some depth issues, and Dion could be a great coach. Just going to be a tough start for him, I think, at the very least. TCU, on the other end, their quarterback, who is, I'm going to make sure to check here, Chandler Morris, was actually the starting quarterback last year in their first game against Colorado before he got hurt when he was replaced by Duggan, and we kind of all know how that played out. So where I'm going with that is yes, TCU lost Max Duggan, but clearly they have faith in Chandler Morris here as the starting quarterback. I think their offense is going to be mostly fine. If there's anything with the Sonny Dykes team that I have faith in, it's their offense. And I just have this feeling that it's going to be a rough go for Colorado, and they're going to have maybe some trouble scoring some points, especially as they get later in the game. So I like laying the points with TCU. I think they're just a much better team, and I think that Colorado is going to have some rough times in the second half, especially get some points on the board. So I like the under as well. That's the 59.5 is on the north side of a lot of key numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. 58 being a pretty key number, 59 being a pretty key number. Getting under that with the Hulk is really valuable there. And that's where sometimes you'll see us take an A grade on a number like this that is got a smaller differential between the projection and the total because it's on the right side of the key numbers. And like this, I think it's a great example of that. You talked about that game last year. Colorado was in that game in the first half because of how bad Morris was. Now, again, you have to assume he's gotten a lot better over this last year. It's not like he's been playing video games the whole time. At least I hope not. And his improvement, should, like you said, combined with the Sonny Dykes offense. It's not like it's the TCU of old. And so that's the thing I think that people need to, of course, continue to remember is that this is not, the Gary Patterson TCU that played fantastic defense, would run those back then weird, probably now a little bit more normal, the 3-3-5s and those type of things that were much more exotic at the time, but struggled offensively, and they had that defensive identity. That is not a Sonny Dykes team. TCU's defense will still be okay because they're in the Big 12, they're in DFW, they get a lot of talent, but their offense is where, they can kind of reload a little bit easier based off the coach, the schemes, that sort of thing. And so they should be able to put up, again, kind of as many points as they want, but, first game, I'm not expecting their offense to be so fine-tuned that they put up 60 by themselves. And so if Colorado is able to hang around a little bit, kind of looks like last year, kind of get run away from by the end, whether it's second half or second quarter or whatever, kind of see a similar situation happening here. So under 59.5, again, right side of the bunch of key numbers, TCU minus 21 on the right side of the hook, drops to a B grade probably, in my opinion, if you lose that hook, because 21 is definitely possible. Something to remember is that the probability of a team winning by a certain number changes based off where you think the average is. Of course, since we think the average is at 26, 21 is more common in this game than maybe 3 is, right? Even though 3 is the most common outcome, 3 is not exactly common in this one. So 21, a little bit more weight of probability in a game like this than a tighter contest. So numbers here are pretty important, and we got 2 really good ones for the noon game of the day. To the afternoon slot, a little bit of a weaker slate there, but one of intrigue always in the Pacific Northwest, Boise State and Washington. Washington's definitely the better team here. Offensively, best unit on the field. Both defenses are respectable, Boise State's offense really took off last year after they moved on from Bachmeier, who we saw play for Louisiana Tech here in week 0. And I won't have to mention too much more about that because it wasn't overly pretty. But taking off for Boise State still kind of puts them around average for college football. Good for a group of 5 team. Average for overall, but that defense actually is still pretty good and kind of can hang with a bunch of teams. And that's where this Boise State team still has the ability to hang around with Power 5 teams because of that defense. I think they hang around in this one. Unlikely to win, though, according to the model, only winning 20% of the time. Model says they lose by an average of 13 points, but they can cover 56% of the time. We're going to grab the 14.5, the hook important here. I think there's a decent chance they can cover because of that hook. And we're also going to go under 58. As I mentioned, 2 pretty good defenses. Model projects 55. And again, kind of like we just talked about, similar situation with the projected score to the TCU game, but under 58, not quite as valuable as under 59.5. That's why this is a B grade and that's an A grade. If this was 59.5, because Jared, I think we'd be in an A grade on it, but at 58, not quite as exciting of a number, still worth the investment. And so this is kind of how we would tell you to play the TCU under if it drops to 58, drops to a B grade, still worth it, just not as exciting. Because Jared, what do you have for us on this one?
I think that you hit the nail on the head when you talked about how good Boise State's defense is, that even up against a team like Washington, who everybody thinks is going to have a real good season, Boise State actually grades out according to the model as having the better defense. And so the Boise State defense is no joke at all. The other thing I would say is that Boise State on offense, once they went to Taylon Green last year and moved away from Hank Bachmeier, that's when Boise State kind of started rolling last season. And so definitely, I think Washington is the better team here, but I think you are definitely, remiss if you just dismiss them in this game. I think 14.5 is way too many points. It has, for the record, it has never been the big games where Boise State has had problems. Boise State has always done well in these big marquee games. It's the Friday night game against Nevada. It's the UTEP. Friday or UTEP. Yeah, a perfect example. And so I think that Boise State is going to come out. I think Andy Avalos is going to have a defensive game plan. Don't get me wrong, stopping Michael Penix is going to be very, very difficult.
Absolutely.
But I think Avalos is going to have a decent game plan that can keep them in the game. I think these are correlated plays, honestly, getting the 14.5 in a game that you think is going to go under 58. I think there's going to be like I wouldn't be surprised if there's some lengthy scoring droughts, 10-minute scoring droughts in this game with these defenses kind of trading some blows back and forth. Anyway, I think Washington wins, but definitely Boise State, I think, can keep it close.
You have to think Boise State's offensive game plan is to take advantage of the new clock rules and really grind this game down to keep the ball out of Penix's hand, because he's so electric offensively that even though they have a good defense, they don't want to be out there more than they have to be. And that kind of, again, leads to a higher likelihood of a cover and a higher likelihood of going under. Obviously, there's all the caveats about turnovers, right? This is a game that could easily swing based off of turnovers. I think this game is very similar to the Hawaii-Vanderbilt game that we just saw with regards to the differential between the two teams. Vanderbilt's sure the better team, but Hawaii came out and gave them everything they wanted and had a great chance at the upset if it wasn't for 2 red zone trips that went empty, a turnover at the wrong time, kick return, right, for a touchdown, that sort of thing. And those things can absolutely swing your bets. In the long run, it washes out in the individual game, you never know. But that's going to be the difference here. If Boise can be on the right side of those things, they've got a chance to ugly this game up and actually win it. If they don't get on the right side of those things, they won't win. And then we're just hoping for a low scoring game and cover, just like Hawaii wasn't on the right side of those things, but still was able to cover such a big number. This would not surprise me if this game is like 17-13 going into the fourth quarter and they've just really mucked it up, because that's exactly what they're going to want to do, try to do. Their offense, like you said, playing well enough last year, maybe they can have enough success to do that. And defensively, even though almost everybody's outmatched going up against Washington's offense defensively, Boise State should be able to limit the damage and prevent this from running away. And again, that game plan of we've got to grind this game down, I think makes this, like you said, this correlated plays a little bit more likely to hit. Because Jared, we haven't talked this year, we didn't talk at all in week 0 about parlays. Same game parlays. And when I say same game parlays, I don't mean the gimmick same game parlays that the sports books do, where they just come up with random odds and it's usually negative expected value plays. I'm talking about just parlaying side and total. We talk about on occasion, if you like the dog and the under, that might be a more positive expected value play to sprinkle a little bit on that, because of the correlation there gives you a higher probability than the independence that the math would lead you to if you assume that. This, I think, is one of those situations where maybe dropping a tiny bit on the parlay of these two things together, because they aren't completely independent, you actually give yourself a little bit of an edge. Not quite as much of an edge as if it was like plus 14.5 and under 40, but a little bit of an edge here, putting a small bit on that. I know a lot of people like to do parlays. We wouldn't recommend it all the time, but this might be a decent opportunity to do that and get kind of a two birds with one stone. One thing happens, Boise State really limits the scoring in this game. You got a good chance to win both and kind of multiply your payout.
Can't wait to hear you and Jake talk about NFL same game parlays this season with some of those totals that we're going to see.
Yeah, because that's where, of course, you start talking about it really, right? But the issue there is you don't get as quiet. You get the lower totals, but you don't get as much of the big spreads. So in college football, you get the bigger spreads. You don't get the total. So that's why you have to really be careful with those. Don't get carried away. Don't do too many of them, because you can lose too much too quick. But anyway, just a nugget for that game to think about. Some interesting night games here: UTSA and Houston. And my goodness, I am so excited for this game. Why is that? Because there's triple digits all over the screen. Good offenses, questionable defenses, and that's going to make for some fun. The predicted score in this game, 34-31. And we always joke about these projected scores and how unlikely they are. I think Auburn's projected score is like 50-4. And you're like, well, that's literally not going to happen. But like 34-31, like that could happen, and sign me up. That sounds like a fun game.
Yep.
Cousin Jared, Model likes Houston in this one. Thinks that they win this 59% of the time. UTSA is favored. Model says wrong team favored game here. We're not going to take a pick on this side. We're going to come back to that on Wednesday and make our official recommendation for our people over on Dub Club, partially because the money lines aren't out yet. And anytime you get around zero, you want to be thinking about having that money line as an option. So we don't want to overcommit to that right now, taking or laying a 1.5 or something like that when the money lines are. But Model kind of likes Houston. I think you're a little bit more leery of Houston. Houston at home, Model basically says it's pretty close to a toss-up, but that home field skews Houston's way. Houston's so disappointing last year. The big question is, how much does last year mean for this year versus how much does 2 years ago and before that and all the success that Dana Holgerson's had at Houston matter? Because last year was so weird and such an aberration for Houston. So before we get to our official pick on this, I just kind of want to get your thought on the side and how you feel about, we know UTSA is going to be solid, but how you feel about this Houston team this year after whatever the heck it was that happened last year.
Yeah, with Houston, I'm not too concerned about the offense because they have Dana Holgerson and because they have some good offensive skill players. And mostly they lost Clayton Tune, but they brought in Donovan Smith, who was starting quarterback for Texas Tech at points last season, went 4-4 as Texas Tech starting quarterback last year. I think they're going to come in, and I think they're going to be fine offensively. Where I have concerns is defensively, especially going into the Big 12, which the Big 12 not as offensive happy as it was in the past, but there are still plenty of teams that can put up points, and so that's my concern for Houston this season, squarely defensively. I think that you could just look at their season, and on the last slide you had their triple digits in their defensive rating, which, defense lower is better. So triple digits, not good. I literally think you can say their season is going to go how their defense goes. If they finish 100 or below a low number, play slightly above average defense, I think they're going to have a good season. If they go up above 100, I think that they're going to be in for a really tough first season in the Big 12.
And I think the biggest issue, and this is something to keep in mind, viewer, doesn't matter for now, but just keep this in the back of your mind, where we constantly see teams struggling in year one and year two in the transition to a bigger conference, is the depth late in games and late in seasons. It's not going to matter here playing UTSA, but even early in the season when they're playing whatever their early Big 12 games are, I don't have the schedule in front of me, but whether it's Texas or Baylor or Tech or Oklahoma State or whoever, the depth that those teams have typically in year one, maybe in year two, is very different. And then it manifests as the season goes along. So that's, of course, another issue. If Houston has any depth issues on defense, that's going to make it even worse. They've had so many injuries, it seems like, over the last couple of years, both in football and basketball, teams that are just insanely talented that you just just cannot seem to stay healthy for whatever reason. We think there's going to be a lot of points here. You can see on the screen, 65 is the projected total. We're going to go over 59.5 on the wrong side of some of those key numbers. But Cousin Jared, you don't seem to care.
Nope. Don't care. This total should be in the 60s easily. Frank Harris coming back for his 15th season. Like I said, got Donovan Smith there at Houston. I have faith in Dana Holgorsen to come up with something offensively. And again, have lots of questions about Houston's defense and UTSA, who has issues defensively at times as well. Why is this game last year went into like triple overtime or something? There was like 60 something, 70 points in that game. It's not gonna happen. This game's gonna be in the 60s again. I can guarantee you.
Folks, if you had Cousin Jared getting excited, the most excited all show about an over, go ahead and cash your plus 1,000 ticket now, because I feel like that was the most excited I've ever seen you for an over. You're usually more excited about the unders. We have a good under coming up, but I mean, it's
just that this seems so obvious, and that doesn't mean this is going to be a winner. Like I'm sure we'll come back here next week and we'll be making fun of me about how I lost the overplay. But I mean, there is just nothing that we have seen from these two teams the past couple of seasons, and nothing that we saw from their matchup last season that would make me think that this game was going to go under 60 points. It just hasn't been how they've played the past couple of years.
Absolutely. And we always get more views on these college football shows. So some of you watching this have heard me say these sort of things with college basketball and with baseball. So you know what I'm about to say. Some of you haven't. Just as a reminder, right? There's no locks in gambling. There's no, whale, whatever adjectives you want to use on this. Games sometimes have weird things happening. When we say agree, when we say we love this, we're not guaranteeing anything. This game could land right at 58, 59, 55, right? That wouldn't be impossible. What we're just saying is that on average, it seems more likely to go over than not. And so we think it's a really strong investment in the long term. We're going to get some of these picks wrong. We're going to hopefully get more right than wrong. That's what our track record has been. That's what we did in week 0. That's what we're hoping to do here, is just say, one of these is going to miss, 2 of these is going to miss, 3 of these is going to miss, but we're going to get more right than wrong. So yes, something's going to go off here. This one seems like it should get into the 60s. Cousin Jared, UTSA's defensive rating, I think, is actually a little bit better than it would otherwise be, because last year they seemed to play a slightly different style of game down the stretch of their conference season, when they kind of were looking forward to the conference championship game. They didn't really bust out all their toys offensively, so their offensive rating might be a little bit lower. They just played a little bit different, but this is a big game for them. Even though it doesn't matter for conference, this is a huge game for them to beat a Big 12 team, even if it's a newly minted one. They're going to bust out all the tricks, and as that scoring gets up, their defense is going to have a real hard time hanging with an offense like Houston, who, while last year was so weird, like you said, we have full faith in Dana Holgorsen to figure out whatever's going on offensively. And the question marks are on the defensive side of the ball. When Houston's been good, they've had a respectable defense. Last year, I feel like nothing was respectable. But I have to assume this is a wash that taste out of your mouth, come back fresh next year. We rarely see a guy like Dana Holgorsen have multiple bad seasons in a row, right? He tends to be able to bounce back, and especially offensively, should be able to. So over 59.5, we love there. But 2-1 that we think might go a little bit differently. South Alabama and Tulane. Folks, do not skip past this game. Do not ignore this game. This is your group of 5 game of the week. I'm excited for this one. You do see that South Alabama's offense may be a little bit below average. They got a really good defense. Tulane, you saw what they could do last year in the Cotton Bowl, I guess is what it was, where they beat USC. These are 2 pretty solid teams. Either one of these teams could play at a New Year's Day Bowl again. According to Sideline, South Alabama is the 64th ranked team, Tulane 45th. So hanging right in there in the middle. Good season. These 2 teams could compete for a conference title. According to the model, Tulane wins by an average of 8 points. They win 70% of the time. Spread at 7 is pretty spot on. It's not really got a lot of edge either way. So we're going to pass on the side, and instead we're going to take the under. 55, somewhat of a key number, Cousin Jerry. That's why we like this as a B grade, even though the projection is 52. Tell us more.
It's not going to be very many times in a season that you're going to see 2 non-Power 5, and however we're going to amend that starting next year, 2 non-Power 5 teams playing a game where both defenses are above average. That's saying something. I think both of these teams are driven by their defense. The other thing I would say about Tulane, they lost Tajay Spears, who was a very, very, very good running back for them last year. Pratt is still a good quarterback, but I'm thinking it may just take their offense down a notch, not having as much talent there at running back. But really, this just goes back to two really good defenses and getting a very, very key number like 55. To me, that's what this boils down to. Enjoy this game. One of the things that I don't want to say I worry about the future of college football, but with all the conference realignment and everything, I feel like we're getting too focused on all of the big schools. But what makes college football great is games like this. And so I would say, don't discount this game. Make sure you're tuning in. You're going to see some really good football out of these two teams.
And we can lament the changes in college football because we had nothing to do with it, right? As opposed to maybe a little bit of hypocrisy, ESPN doing it because they were directly responsible for a lot of this, right? And so a little bit different when they're lamenting the future of college football and things like that. We can totally talk about this. We had nothing to do with this. It was not our doing. But yes, this is absolutely an exciting game. And whatever the future of college football looks like, and whether we've got 3 power conferences going forward or 4, I think is still kind of to be determined. Apparently, Cal and Stanford are talking about going to the Big 12 now.
Because of course,
I don't know why the Big 12 would want them, but that's a whole other issue. So we've still got chaos. But yes, these types of games, and we're going to have a lot of them this year. We're going to try to make sure we cover them when they happen. Some of the Sun Belt games that are exciting because there's usually enough interesting teams in that conference. It's somehow like the Sun Belt might emerge from this as like the 4th best conference or something, which would be ridiculous if it did.
If you are a fan of Sun Belt football, this is the show for you because I can almost guarantee you that we will be talking about it, at least 1 or 2 Sun Belt teams each week. As long as I am involved in producing the content of the show, there will be Sun Belt teams. And if they don't completely stink, Mountain West teams.
Yeah, and the Mountain West, obviously, kind of been up and down at times. My issue this year is going to be trying to remember who's in which conference, which leads us to Coastal Carolina because I honestly could not remember which conference they ended up in. They're going to play at UCLA. Still good offensively, still questionable defensively, still have the quarterback, don't have the coach. And I think that's the biggest question mark to can this offense still dominate in ways that it has before is how much of that is Grayson McCall and how much is the offensive scheme. I think that's the difference between whether this offense drives Coastal Carolina to another 9 or 10 win season, or if their offense falls back to around average. I don't have a ton of hope for their defense. UCLA, pretty similar to USC, pretty good offense, a good defense on average, but questionable compared to the top dogs, right? That 94 rating is not what you hope to expect for a team wanting to make the playoff. I'm not sure, who's going to come out of the mess of the Pac-12. I assume it'll be a lot like last year, which is coming down to the last 3 weeks, 4 teams have a shot at it, and there's a bunch of chaos. I kind of think UCLA has a shot at being there. The defense is going to be the big question mark. If that defense can improve and get better, which has been the question that I feel like we've asked about every Chip Kelly team ever at this point, they would have a chance to potentially win that conference, make some noise in the playoff, or at least in a New Year's Six Bowl. If that defense is right around average, and again, average being like 60th best in college football, there's no way they're one of the top 4 teams, of course, or anywhere near that. So that's the big question mark for UCLA. And they'll get a good test here early against Grayson McCall, even though it's at home. Model says that UCLA should win this game by about 2 touchdowns, that they win 83% of the time. The spread is priced pretty well, right in this 14.5, 15 mark. And so we're going to go under 65.5. Because in Jared, we talked about the questionable defenses and the offenses, and yet we're going under. What's going on?
Yeah, we're going under because Coastal Carolina, they still have Grayson McCall, but no longer have Jamie Chadwell. I don't think they're going to run in exactly the same type of offense, and I don't think it's going to keep the defenses as off kilter as Coastal offenses in the past have. On the flip side, with UCLA having to replace Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Zach Charbonnet, I think is going to be a tall task for UCLA. They're going to score some points. Chip Kelly will find a way, but I think they could be challenging at the beginning of the season. I think the total in this game is being driven by the fact that you have these 2 perceived up-tempo offenses, when the reality is Chip Kelly has not been that same up-tempo offense that we thought about when he was at Oregon. He just hasn't been that since he's been at UCLA. Both of these teams are going to want to run the ball. That's a hallmark of these two teams. I think with the new clock rules, this is one of those games where you might notice it maybe a tiny bit more than you do in other situations just because they're going to run the ball as much. I think this total is way too high. I would have thought maybe this would be like 61, 62. So I think this game's going to go under just because I think there might see a little bit of, knocking the rust off these offenses, learning some new things, new quarterback. But also, I think you're just going to see the clock churn a lot. I think there's going to be a lot of running the ball in this one.
I feel like there are so many things to talk about in this game. It is a late night game. So first thing to mention being a 10:30 Eastern start, people might be looking for this as a bailout game. Typically, the money comes in on the over as it gets closer. You don't have to run and bet this at 65.5. Now, what are key numbers once you get up to the 60s, right? Like it gets a little bit less key. 30s. In the NFL, when you talk about 30s, in college football, when you get to the 40s, even some of the 50s, some of those numbers are very key. Once you get to the 60s, I guess. But you might get yourself some more wiggle room. So maybe if you want to put half your bet now, hold back half your bet. If you just want to take the 65.5, 65 is questionably a key number, I suppose. But I do think this number might go up because, like you said, the perception. Another thing to comment on, I built my player-based model starting with last year's data, and I was shocked at how the UCLA running back, Charbonnet, was rated, I believe, number one running back in my model, and he was fantastic.
He was good.
Losing him is going to hurt a lot. And that doesn't mean that UCLA can't score. It just means that that's going to make them potentially take a step back.
Yep.
The other thing to talk about, Tim Beck, head coach at Coastal Carolina, was the offensive coordinator a little bit at Texas, 2017 to 2019. Questionable offenses there.
Yep.
Was offensive coordinator at NC State. Questionable offenses there.
Yeah. Yep.
Even when NC State had some injury issues, but even when they didn't, there were some questions there. I just didn't think they performed up to quite the standards we thought. So I'm not saying you can't be a good head coach. Honestly, right, even in the real world, your abilities at one position doesn't necessarily mean you can't do the above position, because maybe you can let people do their thing.
Yeah.
So for him, I kind of think if he can hire, if he has a good offensive coordinator, lets him do his thing, that bodes well for them. But if he wants to have his hand in the offense, I'm a little bit concerned about how much of a step back they're going to take. And like you said, it won't be quite as exotic as some of the stuff that Chadwell did, who we know is, kind of an offensive mastermind.
Yeah.
And if we want to look back to our conversation at the beginning, another step down, potentially going to Liberty. All these coaching moves have been interesting, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, the thing with Liberty is money. There is a lot more money at Liberty. So you're in Conference USA, and not just money as far as your paycheck, but money for facilities, money for everything. Liberty has proved to be a launching pad to go somewhere else. So I think Jamie Chadwell realized that for whatever reason, Coastal just wasn't being perceived as, hey, you're doing good enough to make that leap. Let's go to Liberty. And now will the perception of me change enough for me to go somewhere else? So yeah, it's kind of sad that, results aren't good enough to get you to that next level, that it has to be about money, more exposure, more whatever that is to get you to the next level. But alas, that's life, I suppose.
Yeah. Because obviously, if Coastal's able to win the Sun Belt this year, that would be a heck of an accomplishment. And like you said, the Sun Belt, has kind of launched itself now that the AAC has been, gutted, and been replaced with the Conference USA, who was one of the weaker conferences. Now it's just LOL at what's left in Conference USA. But I mean, the Sun Belt is now potentially the best Group of Five conference, probably the best Group of Five conference, and in prime shape to be even better than whatever the heck becomes of the Pac-12 Mountain West, and as the fifth best conference overall. And the fact that success there, isn't actually good enough is interesting. This Coastal Carolina team will be interesting to watch, though. Again, with a new coach, but with a great quarterback, and UCLA, of course. Like I said, I think this is an interesting game to watch because the futures of these teams could be a lot of different things. Nothing would surprise me here. If UCLA went 7-5, it wouldn't shock me. If they figured something out on defense and went 11-2, that wouldn't shock me. And Coastal, same sort of thing. And that Sun Belt could win it or could be basically 500 if their offense takes a big step back. Nothing would shock me here. But to the point of this play, under 65.5 is an A grade. Model projects 59. And kind of like you said, if these two teams end up running the ball, especially UCLA is a very run-heavy offense, that's going to run the clock. And it's not that these teams won't score a high percentage of the time they have the ball. They just won't have the ball that many times. Yeah. And that'll make it a little bit more difficult to get up to a high number like this. So late game under for us to wrap up the Saturday night and take us into Sunday, where there are 3 Sunday games. Not going to cover the first 2 again. If you want all that information, the picks, the cheat sheet, the metrics, all the fun goodies, Dub Club is where that's at. But LSU, Florida State, my goodness, this should be a fantastic game. It was a fantastic game last year with a wild finish. And you can see looking on the screen, Sideline likes both of these teams. Both of them have a really good offense and a really good defense. Right now, LSU is the 7th best team, Florida State the 15th, but the gap between them is pretty small. We're talking about once you get past those top 4 teams, 5th through like 20th or whatever is just a slight breeze from each other. Some of those teams are going to start winning and looking good and jump into the top 10, and some are going to fall back into the 20, teens and 20s. Right now, who knows? There's a bunch of interesting teams in college football, and these are 2 of them that could compete for a playoff spot. Obviously, LSU has a very tough road in the SEC, but could be playoff caliber or could easily have everything go against them and finish 8-4. And that's, of course, just the way college football goes. Both of these teams had stretches last year where they looked fantastic. And both of them had games that made you kind of wonder how anybody ever thought they were going to get to 10 wins. I think it was more good than bad. And that's what the model is seeing coming into this year is all of that good. With regards to who's going to win, who the heck knows? According to the model, LSU wins this 57% of the time and covers 52% of the time. But this is firmly in toss-up territory. This game is being played in Orlando, so I'm giving Florida State half home field advantage that I would normally give because of the reduced travel. Fan-wise, it should be relatively even. I'm assuming the LSU faithful are going to travel very well, maybe 60-40 in Florida State's favor. The travel helps Florida State a little bit, but it's still mostly a neutral site game. It should be a great one. Model predicts 28-27. That's very possible what it could land at. And if it is, that takes us to another under 58. Models projecting 55. Cousin Jordan, what do you got?
So this is a great game. My father-in-law actually procured suite tickets. Now the tickets are suite, but they're also in a suite for the Astros and Yankees game on Sunday night. And I said, that is wonderful. That is very kind of you. Miss Cousin Jared and my daughter will be more than happy to go to the game with you. I will not be going to the game with you. I will be at home watching Florida State and LSU. This is definitely the highlight of week 1 of college football, the kind of game that really, you're thinking about all offseason, like, man, this is like officially the kickoff of the season. Let's think back to when these 2 teams played last year. I think we could both agree that both of these teams, maybe more than any other teams in college football, kind of grew as the season went on and really kind of came into their own over the course of the season. But that was a slugfest at the beginning of the game last year when these 2 teams played. I think that Jordan Travis for Florida State, great quarterback. Jaden Daniels for LSU, great quarterback. Both of them make a lot of plays with their feet. And I think both of these defenses are well positioned to be able to stop that, whether it's Harold Perkins on LSU tracking down Jordan Travis or Jared Verse, who somehow didn't go pro and stayed at Florida State for the season, being able to track down Jaden Daniels. I think you've got enough defensive star power to kind of, I don't want to say like neuter these quarterbacks a little bit, but keep them contained. And I think that this is going to keep this game close, and I think it's going to keep it lower scoring. The offenses definitely have the ability to explode, but both these defenses are really good, and they have playmakers that can slow down these quarterbacks, I think. So I think you're going to see something very similar that we saw last year. If this game ended something like 27-24 or 31-20, I think that's kind of what you're going to get in this game.
Yeah, last year was 24-23. The whole should they have gone for 2?
Yep.
Then they missed the extra point. Last year, I remember we were recording the week 2 show while I was watching. I had that on my iPad, and I was like, "What is happening right now?" So we'll have to figure out how we're gonna handle that next week with this one on. But you're right; it's the heavyweight matchup of the week. It should be a fantastic game. Should be a tight game. Cousin Jared, is there any thought to there being a little bit more value on this under, maybe a first half under, treating this almost like a playoff game, a Super Bowl, where you kind of say maybe the teams feel each other out a little bit early on? Or do you think the full game under maybe has a little more value? Like, how do you see it? Because we're viewing it as the heavyweight matchup. Do you think they are? Do you think they are going to have that same mentality? Or do you think it's going to be let it rip from the start? What's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I definitely think that, because if I recall correctly, I mean, that game last year, 24-23, there were much more points in the second half of that.
There were 10 points in the first half.
Yeah. It was a really – okay, that's what I thought. It was a low-scoring first half. So yeah. I don't know if you're going to see 10 points again in the first half, but definitely wouldn't be surprised if you saw like 20 or 24 or something like that. And so, yeah, I think a first half underplay, if you wanted to split your bet, do a half first half under, a half full game under, I think that's fine. I think there's a lot of different ways you can play the under here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one, as I think we all are, which takes us to Monday, the dessert of all of this. Cousin Jared, there's no NFL this weekend. This feels like an NFL Sunday night, Monday night, because the Sunday night game is always amazing, and the Monday night game is always like, it's football. We'll watch it. And that's kind of how it feels about this. It's even down to the LSU Florida State game, like so being a slugfest, potentially, more of an NFL type game anyway. And then we get to Clemson Duke, where it's like, well, it's, we're going to watch it, but not quite as exciting as the Sunday night game. So a lot of NFL ties I think, to this one. Yeah. Clemson, Duke, not a bad team. I mean, let's look at the rating right there. Above average offense, above average defense. So Duke's a solid team. We rode them a lot last year on the back half of the season when we finally came around to them. But Clemson, I mean, good chance to be the class of the ACC. Because, Jordan, when I was going through the rosters this season, Clemson brought back almost everybody. Yeah. They are going to be scary good, in my opinion. I think they're well coached. The quarterback controversy, distraction, whatever that is, I think it's good that's behind them now, and they can just move forward and play football. I really like this Clemson team. Model says they can handle Duke even on the road. This is going to be one of their tougher challenges of the season, which is really sad to say how easy their schedule sets up for them. Obviously, not every single game, but this is going to be like their third or fourth hardest game probably. We're going to see a lot of Clemson minus 20s and 30s this season, I think. I think their offense is going to be improved. That defense is obviously fantastic. Model says a 52% chance of covering, so a pretty weak edge there. We're going to play Clemson because it's minus 105. That's kind of what gets us over the hurdle there and the on the right side of 14. It's those kind of things. At 14, a little bit less value. If you're having to play at minus 115, question value there, but this is just enough to get us there to that B grade on Clemson at minus 13.5, get the win at 14, and the odds there make our break-even point a little bit better. And we also like the under 55.5. That Clemson defense is fantastic. Duke knows the only chance they have is to slow this game down, and I think they're going to slow it down. I just think they're not going to be able to score on Clemson. If Duke doesn't score, it's going to make it hard for the over to hit and hard for Duke to cover. Cousin Jared, what do you got?
Mike Elko, one of the most underrated coaches in FBS, he will have a game plan that will keep this Clemson offense off kilter for, I don't know, a quarter and a half, just long enough to where Clemson wins this game something like, I don't know, 35-14. Or something like that, and we can all be happy. Clemson, I think, is going to be a good team. We only have to wait until September 23rd to get Florida State visiting Clemson.
That's early. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that is early, and I think even early enough where I don't really think either team could screw it up. Because even if Florida State loses to LSU, like there's nothing wrong with losing the game to LSU. Nobody's going to look at Florida State like, oh, that derailed their season. So yeah, that's going to be a really exciting one. Yeah. Anyway, Duke, great story. Go back and look at who Duke beat last year. Not an impressive list of teams. Clemson will take care of business, like you mentioned, having that quarterback controversy behind them. I think it's going to be very beneficial. Everybody just can focus on, playing football and not thinking about like, do we need to make a quarterback change? When are we going to pull the quarterback? How much is the backup quarterback going to play? All that good stuff. Clemson will assert its dominance in this game.
Yeah, you are absolutely correct. Mike Elko did a fantastic job with them last season. To your point, though, they had a nice bowl win over UCF. They finished the season with a fantastic home win against Wake Forest. Other than that, though, they beat a Miami team that
was cratering at the time.
cratering at the time for sure. I mean, that Miami, was like up and down, up and down, up and down, but the downs were down. Otherwise, I mean, Boston College, Virginia Tech, Virginia, NC&T, Northwestern, and Temple. Not exactly murderer's row. Losses to Kansas, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, and Pittsburgh.
And that's not to take anything away from Duke. Like when you're Duke, that's when you have to have a good season, is when you can capitalize on other teams having bad seasons. That's not taking anything away from Duke, but just the reality is they beat a lot of teams.
They're not on Clemson's level.
Yeah, they beat a lot of teams that weren't great.
Yeah. And of course, noticeably absent from that schedule last year, Florida State and Clemson, both the two best teams in the ACC. They also did not have to play Notre Dame, who plays a handful of teams in the ACC every season. So great story last year, Duke, just not on the same level as this Clemson team. I'm really high on Clemson this year. I don't really know what else there's to say other than that. Cousin Jared, you made an interesting point there, and I'm gonna put you on the spot here. For the people who like to do a live bet, is this one where you would either hold back your entire bet, put half your bet, something, or maybe just double down on it in game if you do see Duke keeping it close early on? Is it a situation where you want to get all your under money in early and then maybe add some Clemson later? Because if it is 7-7 late in the second quarter, you might be able to get a Clemson -7 type live bet.
Yeah. I think that's perfectly fine. I honestly, I'm confident enough in Clemson. I would just go full bore on both of these. We gave them both a B grade, go B grade right now. And then if that opportunity presents itself, maybe go half a unit on Clemson laying 7 or whatever number you might get. Honestly, I'd say anything less than 10, I'd be hey, throw another half unit on it.
Yeah, that's what when you're talking about. That's what I was thinking about. If Duke's game plan, and again, well-coached team, bunch of smart athletes, obviously, could make it challenging early. Cousin Jared, is there an interesting opportunity you think to bet Clemson going forward and backing them if they don't look great against Duke, where we say, hey, it's the first game of the season, Duke's well coached, it was a perfect game plan, and we're not going to be, if Clemson wins this by exactly 14, barely covers, right, and wins 28-14 or something, is that, to me, that's a situation where you say, hey, Duke's got a good game plan and they're well coached. I'm not deterred by that, but maybe other people will be, and maybe it's an opportunity for us to back Clemson going forward. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I would want to see what we get from Cade Klubnik on this game on Monday, because clearly I feel like we know Clemson's defense is going to be great. Their season is going to be determined on how well the quarterback position plays, as it's been the last decade, it seems like. Yeah, and if he plays well and is just not asked to do much, I'm fine with that. Yeah, let's back Clemson. If they're putting a lot on him and he's missing throws or looks uncomfortable in the pocket or something, that's when you kind of have to step back and be I'm a little bit worried here, because as solid as Duke has been, they should still be making some plays against Duke. And so if he just looks fine, I'm good. Let's keep backing Clemson. If he looks uncomfortable in the pocket, if he's missing guys, then maybe it's the same Clemson we've been seeing, which is 10 wins, at least in the ACC, but maybe not one of those that's going to be vying for a playoff spot. Well, we'll record our next show before this game happens, so we can't even get that. So that's all we're going to want to talk about it now. Maybe we could talk about it in Discord for those of us who are in Dub Club, or tweet about it or whatever. Or we'll come back the next week and we'll get your Monday, Tuesday morning, whatever quarterback assessment of this Clemson team. Like I said, I'm really high on them, but again, a good early season test for them, because like we said, they should do well against Duke, but also Duke isn't one to be overlooked because they are well coached. They're a decent enough team. So I want to make it say, I'm not trying to speak out of both sides of my mouth. Clemson should win. They are the better team. I don't think they're going to win by 35, because this is not Duke from, I don't know, pick a year where Duke was terrible. There's a lot of them out there, right? It's not 1999 Duke. I hope that was the year they were bad. I don't know. It's not that Duke, right? But the skill differential is definitely there. So Clemson should be able to take care of business. So we like Clemson. We like the under, both of them at B grades, to wrap you up on Monday night. And that is week 1. Cousin Jared, any parting words as our hour is up? The type of thing that you get on Discord, it was 10 o'clock on Saturday night. Everybody else in my house was asleep. I was the only person awake, and I was getting to partake in Florida International La Tech and Hawaii Vanderbilt. It was great. It's what college football was about. I do have to say something about YouTube TV, though. So, YouTube TV now has the multi-view thing where you can watch 2 games on one screen at one time. But the problem is that it doesn't let you select. you get to watch at the same time. It just automatically populates two for you. So I selected, oh, hey, I want to watch Florida International and Louisiana Tech. And the second game that it put up there automatically for me was a preseason Denver Broncos game, which in YouTube's defense, it was probably thinking, what kind of crazy person wants to do a split screen with FIU, La Tech, and Hawaii Vanderbilt? Surely this normal person would want to watch this preseason NFL game. But no. So YouTube, what I'm asking for is I just need like a sicko mode on YouTube TV. I can just watch the two grossest college football games that could possibly be paired together. That's all I'm asking for. So I appreciate you trying to save me from myself, but I'm an adult. I make my own choices. I want to watch terrible college football.
I'm a little surprised. I feel like the preseason game that would have made more sense would have been at least a regional one. Like if you had FIU and like Miami Dolphins, been like, okay, they play Louisiana Tech. If it was LS, if it was the Saints, right? It'd be like, oh, like this person made like. Why is this person watching FIU La Tech? It's probably because they're from Miami or Louisiana, right? And so, Denver, like, who was Denver playing? Do you even remember?
I don't even know. I saw it wasn't Vanderbilt in Hawaii, and I turned it off the split screen because I didn't care.
There you go. Maybe it was in New Orleans or Miami. We can only hope. Someone in the comments let us know who it was. All right. Well, that is our show. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you can ensure all the sports betting content provided on this channel shoved right into your feed. Remember, we'll be back with baseball content all week. Had another great winning week last week and hope to continue that going forward. And as always, best of luck. And remember, you can eat your betting money, but please don't bet your eating money.